My name is Natalie Bennett, and 10 years ago, my mother stood in my driveway in a cream silk blazer, holding a leather folio like she was walking into a boardroom, and told me she'd come to talk about restoring balance to the family. She did not say hello first. She did not ask about my children. She opened that folio, slid out a single sheet of ivory cardstock with her assistant's handwriting on it, because my mother has never once handwritten anything herself if she could dictate it instead, and set it on the hood of my car like she was serving me papers. 6 line items. One number circled twice at the bottom. $610,000. What she didn't know is that I had my own accounting, not on ivory card, in a scuffed gray fireproof lockbox that had lived on the top shelf of my closet for 10 years, filled with every unopened envelope, every screenshot, every voicemail I'd transcribed word for word, because charting is what I do for a living, and I don't forget things. I document them. She brought a list of what she wanted from me. I brought a list of everything she'd done to earn a no. Before I get into it, if this is your first time here, this channel is called Her Side of the Story, for every woman who held it together alone, and if that's ever been you, even for one hard year, hit subscribe, because there are a lot of us and I'd like you to stay. And while you're getting comfortable, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always read them. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand the family I came from before you'll understand what it cost me to leave it. I grew up in Thornwood, Connecticut, the kind of town where the 4th of July parade has a dress code nobody admits out loud. My father, Richard Calloway, managed private wealth for people who summered somewhere with a boat. My mother, Vivian, sat on the hospital gala committee and the garden club board, and had opinions about whose lawn needed reseeding. We belonged to a club with a weight. Everyone in Thornwood knew the Calloway name, and my mother made sure of it every single week. My younger sister, Whitney, was the daughter my mother had actually been hoping for. Homecoming court, a debutante ball, a laugh that filled a room on command. I was the older one, quiet, a little too serious. The one who read at the dinner table and got straight A's and never once got asked to dance at cotillion. My mother used to say, fondly, in front of guests, "Natalie's our practical one." It took me years to understand that practical was the polite word for the one we don't have to worry about impressing anybody with. I say all this without bitterness now. I say it because you need the math before the story makes sense. In my family, attention was a budget, and Whitney was always funded first. I remember being 9 years old at a Calloway Christmas party, standing behind the kitchen island in a dress that itched at the collar, watching my mother introduce Whitney to a room full of adults, like she was unveiling a piece of art. "This one's going to break hearts," she'd say, laughing, and everyone would laugh with her. When it was my turn, if I was mentioned at all, it was, "And this is Natalie, she's the responsible one." Responsible. Like I was a smoke detector. Useful, easy to forget was even in the room, until something went wrong. My father wasn't cruel, not in any way you could point to directly. He just went quiet whenever the two of us were alone together. Like he didn't quite know what to do with a daughter who didn't need managing. He came to my school events, technically. He stood in the back. He checked his watch. Whitney's soccer games. He coached from the sideline. It wasn't that he loved her more. Exactly, I don't think it was ever that simple. It was that she was easy to be proud of in public, and I required something quieter, something he never learned how to give. By the time I was in high school, I'd stopped expecting the spotlight and started building a life just outside of it, where nobody was watching closely enough to have opinions. I liked it there. It felt safer. I didn't know yet that the same instinct that let me disappear from my own family's attention would one day let me build an entire life my mother couldn't touch, because she never thought to look for it. I became a nurse, not the specialty my mother would have chosen. She'd have preferred something with better lighting, if I'm honest. But I loved it, and I was good at it. Emergency department, night shift, the kind of job where you learn fast that titles and zip codes don't save anybody. I met Owen Bennett on a Tuesday in March, when he came through triage with a broken finger from a fence post accident, and made the entire waiting room laugh, describing it. He worked landscaping and light construction, had grown up outside a town 2 hours north with his mother, Carol, who'd raised him alone on a postal worker's salary after his father left before Owen turned 3. He was quiet in the way people are when they've had to be reliable their whole lives. He listened like what you said actually mattered to him, which, it turned out, it did. Our first date was tacos out of a truck in a hardware store parking lot. He paid in cash, he counted out carefully. I liked that about him instantly, that he didn't pretend it didn't matter. He told me he wanted to build something of his own someday. He just didn't know what yet. I told him I wanted a life that felt like mine, not one assembled for me. He said, then we're already on the same page. We dated 2 years before he proposed, at his mother's kitchen table. No ring yet. Just a question. I want to build a life with you. Will you let me try? I said yes before he finished the sentence. I called my mother that night. I remember the silence on the other end lasted so long I checked to see if the call had dropped. Then she said, Natalie, you need to think very seriously about what this means for this family, not congratulations. A warning, delivered in the same tone she used for RSVP etiquette. My father called back 2 days later, not to congratulate me, to ask if I understood what I'd be walking away from. Whitney texted that night, Mom hasn't stopped crying since you called her. Are you happy now? I was, actually. For the first time in years. I just didn't say it back. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived. Cream stationery, my mother's handwriting. 4 paragraphs of careful cursive that all led to the same place. If you marry this man, you are choosing him over everything we've built for you. We will not be attending, and you should not expect a place at this table afterward. She never used Owen's name once in the whole letter. Just this man. I read it twice, folded it along its existing crease, and put it in a drawer. I didn't know yet that it would be the first item in a collection I'd keep for the next decade. We got married on a Saturday in June in Carol's backyard, under a maple tree Owen had climbed as a kid. 19 guests, folding chairs from the church down the road, a potluck instead of a caterer. Carol made her mother's biscuits and cried through the entire ceremony, holding both my hands afterward and saying, well, you're mine now too, if you'll have me. My dress was $140 off the clearance rack. Owen wore his one good suit. Nobody from the Callaway side came. Nobody from the Callaway side called. That night, in the tiny apartment we shared above a dry cleaner, I sat on the edge of the bed holding a bouquet of grocery store daisies and cried, not from doubt, from grief. I had just done the most important thing of my life, and the people who raised me hadn't bothered to watch. A week later, I mailed my parents a photo from the wedding, Owen and me laughing under that maple tree, with a note, we're happy. I hope someday you can be too. It came back 11 days later, unopened. A red stamp across the front, returned to sender. I sat with that envelope in my lap for a long time. Then I got a plain manila folder from the hall closet, wrote the date on the front in pen, and put it inside. I didn't know it yet, but that folder was the beginning of the lockbox. The first year was the hardest. I called on birthdays, voicemail, every time. I left messages I rehearsed in my head before I dialed, because I knew each one might be the last thing she ever heard from me. Hi Mom. Just wanted to say hi. We're doing well. I miss you. Call whenever you're ready. She never called back. Every card I sent her birthday, my father's, Christmas, came back with the same red stamp. My father sent exactly one text that whole year. Your mother needs space. Give her time. For words, no follow-up. Whitney posted a family photo that spring, my parents, her boyfriend at the time, all smiling on the club veranda, captioned Sunday with my people. I wasn't in it. I'd never been asked to be in it. I printed the screenshot. Not to torture myself, I'd started doing something I couldn't fully explain even to myself. Filing every returned card, every unanswered call log, every piece of proof that my family had quietly decided I no longer existed. By spring, the manila folder was too full for the drawer, so I bought the lockbox. By year 2, Owen had an idea he couldn't put down. He'd been reading everything he could get his hands on about vertical farming, growing food in stacked, climate-controlled trays, instead of open fields, using a fraction of the water and land. He thought the automation side of it was where the real problem was. Nobody had built a simple, affordable robotic system that could manage a small vertical farm without a team of engineers on staff. He quit the landscaping crew. Not recklessly, he'd been sketching prototypes on nights and weekends for months first. He rented half of a barn from a farmer 40 minutes outside the city, put a space heater and 2 secondhand monitors on a folding table, and started building. I came home from 12-hour shifts and sat next to him some nights until midnight, reviewing his cost projections, because I understood budgets even if I didn't understand robotics. He built the machine. I built the plan for how it might actually become a business. We called it Verdant Robotics. It launched with 3 small farms as customers, and a demo unit that jammed twice during the first pitch meeting. Those early years were leaner than I ever let on to anyone outside our house. I worked 3 12-hour shifts a week, and picked up a 4th whenever we needed it, which was often. Owen slept maybe 5 hours a night for the better part of 2 years, and I'd come home at 7 in the morning to find him already at the folding table, eyes red, running numbers on a system that had failed its overnight test for the 3rd time that week. We ate a lot of eggs. I remember doing math in my head in the grocery store line more than once, putting things back on the shelf so the total would clear. Nobody in Thornwood ever had to put anything back on a shelf. I never told my mother any of that, not that she was asking. But some nights I wanted to. Not for sympathy, just so someone from my old life would know what it actually costs to build something real, instead of being handed one. Owen never once suggested we ask his mother for help, and Carol never once offered money, because there wasn't any to offer, but she showed up in every other way there was. She drove down with a trunk full of groceries more times than I can count, never making it a thing. Just quietly restocking our fridge while we were at work, and leaving before we got home so we wouldn't feel like charity. That was the difference. I came to understand. My family had money and conditions. Owen's mother had nothing to spare and gave it anyway, freely, without a single string attached. That year I also upgraded the lockbox. I started numbering every item and dating it, not because I was building a case, I told myself, but because a nurse without documentation is just a person guessing. And I have never once been a person who guesses. Numbers don't lie. Neither would I. Our son Caleb was born that winter. 6 pounds, 4 ounces, and screamed for the first 3 hours straight before falling asleep on Owen's chest, and not waking up again until morning. Carol flew in, drove 4 hours each way, and stayed 2 weeks. She cooked. She rocked Caleb at 3 a.m. so I could sleep. She brought a hand-knit blanket, the color of butter, and a tiny silver spoon engraved with his birth date. That's what a grandmother looks like. I'd mailed my mother the ultrasound photo 5 months earlier. Returned. I mailed the birth announcement. Returned. A photo of Caleb asleep on Owen's chest. Returned. 3 more items. Numbered. Dated. Filed. Whitney texted a friend of ours from high school, something that got forwarded to me. Without comment. Her kids don't really have grandparents. That was her choice. I sat with my phone in the nursery for a long time. Caleb was asleep in my arms. Carol was humming something in the kitchen while she washed bottles. My son had a grandmother. Her name was Carol Bennett, and she'd never once missed a single one of his birthdays. I printed the text and filed it too. Our daughter Ruby came 2 years after that. By then Verdant had 11 employees and a real office instead of a barn. I want to be clear about something. I didn't keep that lockbox to fuel some fantasy of revenge. Most weeks I forgot it existed, up on its shelf collecting dust behind the winter coats. But every time something new arrived, a returned card, a screenshot, a voicemail I saved because deleting it felt like erasing proof something had actually happened, I filed it. Same process every time. Date it, number it, put it away. Owen asked me once why I bothered. I told him the truth. Someday our kids might ask why they don't have grandparents on my side. And when they do, I want them to have facts, not my version and not hers. The receipts? He nodded. He understood receipts. He was an engineer. Engineers keep build logs for the exact same reason. By year 7, Verdant had grown past anything either of us had let ourselves imagine out loud. 80 employees, farms using our systems in 11 states. A Series B round that made the local business journal for paragraphs, small photos, the kind of coverage that people in the industry actually read and everyone else scrolls past. Except somebody in Thornwood didn't scroll past it. An old friend from high school, Meg, texted me random. But your mom asked me at the club last week if I knew anything about some farming company your husband runs. She seemed weirdly interested. Thought you should know. My mother hadn't said my name out loud in 7 years. She didn't know the first thing about vertical farming, but she wanted to. The math was changing, and Vivian Calloway had always been very good at math when it suited her. That same year, I sent what I told myself would be my last birthday card. Inside it, a photo of Caleb and Ruby at a pumpkin patch, matching flannel shirts, Ruby missing her 2 front teeth, Caleb grinning with a pumpkin nearly as big as he was. On the back I wrote, "They ask about you sometimes. I tell them, you live far away." It came back 9 days later, but the flap had been carefully steamed open and resealed with a strip of packing tape. Slightly crooked, slightly yellowed. Someone had opened it, looked at their faces, and sent it back anyway. I sat at the kitchen table with that envelope for a long time. I was fairly certain I knew who'd opened it, and fairly certain I knew who'd made him seal it back up and mail it anyway. My father had always been the one enforcing my mother's silence, never the one designing it. That was hers alone. If she couldn't control who I loved, she'd decided the next best thing was to erase that I existed at all. The acquisition offer came in year 9. A national agribusiness company wanted Verdant's automation technology folded into their operations. $210 million. Ulin announced in a press release that got picked up by 2 national outlets, and a segment on the local news. Owen and I stood in our kitchen when the numbers finally landed, and just looked at each other for a long minute. Because it didn't feel real yet. It felt like a spreadsheet cell with too many zeros, the kind you double check because it has to be a typo. I checked the formula 3 times. It wasn't a typo. 2 weeks after the announcement, my phone lit up with a text not to me, to Whitney, but sent to my number by mistake, because my mother has never fully understood how group threads work. It read, "We need a real plan before we talk to her. She's not going to just hand this over. Make a list." She responds to lists. I stared at it for a full minute before I understood what I was looking at. Then, I screenshotted it, printed it, filed it, numbered it. I also, for the first time, called a family attorney, not to threaten anyone, just to understand where I stood. A woman named Patricia walked me through it in 20 minutes. My mother had no legal claim to anything. Our children's trusts were airtight, and a decade of clearly documented estrangement made any argument otherwise a non-starter in any courtroom that mattered. We finalized irrevocable trusts for Caleb and Ruby that same month. Nobody, not my mother, not my father, not any future version of my sister with a spreadsheet, would ever be able to touch a dollar of it. Whitney reached out first, 3 weeks before the deal closed. A text, "Hey, thinking about you. How are the kids?" 6 words after 9 years of silence, delivered like we'd simply been on a long pause instead of a full stop. She said she'd be in town for work and would love to catch up. I agreed to meet her public place, my terms, an hour, no more. She showed up 15 minutes late in a blazer that still had the crease marks from the store, hugged me a beat too long, told me I looked amazing 3 separate times in the first 10 minutes, and then began asking questions. How big was the house now? Were the kids in private school? Was Owen still running things day to day, or had he stepped back since the deal? How many employees? Halfway through our coffees, I caught her reflection in the window, angling her phone toward the parking lot, photographing my car, not scrolling, cataloging. I let her finish her latte. I answered every question the way you answer small talk from someone you don't actually trust vaguely, politely giving away nothing that mattered. When we hugged goodbye, she held on a beat too long again. Not once, in the entire hour, did she say the word sorry. I drove straight home and filed the visit. Numbered, dated, noted, 32 questions, 0 acknowledgement of 9 years of silence. That night, I called Patricia again. "They're coming," I told her. "My mother, probably before the deal closes. She'll bring demands. Patricia was quiet for a second, then said, Natalie, you don't need me for that part. The legal structure is already done. What you're describing now isn't a legal problem. It's a personal one. And for that, you already know exactly what you need to say. She was right. If this story is landing for you, if you've ever had someone disappear for years and then reappear right when your circumstances changed, I want to hear it. Tell me in the comments, because I think more of us carry this than we ever say out loud. And if you haven't yet, this is a good moment to hit subscribe. Because on her side of the story, for every woman who held it together alone, this is exactly the kind of story we tell. The news reached my father before it reached me directly. His voicemail came in while I was making Caleb's lunch on a Tuesday morning, a slower voice than I remembered, older, with a crack running underneath it that hadn't been there a decade ago. Nat, I saw the news about the company. I've been meaning to call for a long time. I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago. Your mother wants to talk. Please, when you're ready. I love you. I played it 3 times. Proud of you for words I'd waited 10 years to hear. But I noticed the timing before I noticed anything else. He hadn't called after the wedding. Not after Caleb was born. Not after Ruby. Not after any of the 7 birthday cards that came back with a red stamp on them. He called after the number got big enough to make the local news. He'd always been proud of me on paper. What he'd never once been was brave enough to pick up the phone when there was nothing attached to the call but love. My mother's message came 2 days later, a text, not a call, long and clearly drafted more than once. No typos, no shorthand, the kind of message you write and rewrite until it sounds like it costs you nothing. Natalie, I know time has passed. I think about you and the children constantly. Life is short, and I believe some things matter more than old disagreements. I would like to discuss the future, the children, the family, what it means to move forward together. 61 words. Not one of them was sorry. Not one of them mentioned the 9 returned cards, the ultimatum letter. The 10 years of silence she'd built herself, brick by brick. I didn't answer. I screenshotted it, printed it, filed it, numbered it, and closed the lockbox. Meg called that Friday. Whitney's telling everyone at the club, she visited you last month, she said. Says you live in some huge estate. Says the kids go to some fancy private academy. None of it was true. We lived in a nice, ordinary house. And our kids went to public school 2 blocks away. But that wasn't really the point. And we both knew it. Your mother's booking a flight, Meg said. I heard it from Linda, who heard it from Whitney directly. She's coming to see you. I already knew. I'd known since the misdirected text, since the acquisition announcement, since the reconnaissance lunch and the photographed car. I'm going to let her in, I told Meg, and then I'm going to show her exactly what I've been keeping. I hung up and stood in my kitchen, the kitchen with Carol's photo on the fridge next to the kids' school art, the only grandmother they had ever actually known. She arrived on a Tuesday morning, cream blazer, leather folio under one arm. The same pearl earrings she'd worn to every event I could remember from childhood. She stood at the end of the driveway for a long moment before she came up the walk, taking in the house the porch. The garden beds Owen had put in that spring, the way an appraiser takes in a property. Not the way a mother takes in her daughter's home. The doorbell rang. I opened it, 3 feet of driveway between us. Natalie? Mom. A silence, maybe 4 seconds long. I came to talk about the children's future. Not I missed you. Not I was wrong. Not even I'm sorry it took this long. The children's future, the same children whose ultrasound photos she'd returned unopened. I looked at the folio in her hand and said, come in, and led her to the kitchen instead of the living room. Because the kitchen had good light and Carol's photo on the fridge, and it felt like the room where the truth actually lived in our house. She sat. I poured 2 glasses of water. No coffee, because coffee is for people who are staying. Her eyes landed on Carol's photo on the fridge, and stayed there a beat too long. Something crossed her face I couldn't quite name. She opened the folio and slid the ivory cardstock across the table and read it aloud, item by item, in the same voice she used to announce gala honorees. Your father's business line of credit. Refinanced, $180,000. Whitney's graduate school loans. Paid in full, $95,000. A renovation to the house I grew up in. $140,000. A reinstatement of the family trust in my name. Structured, she said, the way it always should have been. A monthly stipend. Going forward, $4,500. Total. Circled twice. $610,000. Not once did she say sorry while she read it. I stood, walked to the hall closet, and brought back the lockbox. I set it on the table next to her folio. 2 documents side by side. Hers, 1 page, 6 line items, $610,000. Mine, 10 years, dozens of numbered entries, 0 apologies received. You brought a list, Mom, I said. I brought one too. She stared at the box. I don't understand. You will. I opened it to the first item, the wedding photo, unopened, red stamp across the front. I set it on the table. Then the birthday card from that same year. Then the Christmas card. I laid them out slowly, the way you lay out a chart before rounds. No commentary, just documentation in order. Her eyes moved over the growing row of returned envelopes, and something in her face started, very slowly, twofold. These are the cards I sent you. Every year, every single one came back. Natalie, I'm not finished. I moved to the next section. Whitney's forwarded text. Her kids don't really have grandparents. I read it aloud, once, flatly. Then the misdirected message. She responds to lists. My mother's hand went to her mouth. I pulled out the last item, the birthday card with the resealed flap, the crooked tape. This one was opened, I said. Somebody looked at their faces. And then somebody made him seal it back up and send it anyway. Her jaw tightened. For 1 second, maybe 2, something honest surfaced in her face. Something that wasn't performance. I was afraid, she said, so quietly I almost missed it. If I let any of it in, I would have had to admit I'd been wrong for years. That I'd lost all this time for nothing. Then, just as fast, it was gone, replaced by the chin lift I remembered from every argument of my childhood. But you left, Natalie. You made your choice. You told me not to come back if I married him, I said. I didn't leave. I believed you. She had no answer for that. We gave you everything growing up, she tried instead. The schools, the clubs, every opportunity a child could ask for. This is how you repay 15 years of that. You raised me, I said. That's not a debt, Mom. That's what parents do. And I've spent 10 years wondering how you squared all of that with sending back a photo of your own grandson asleep on his father's chest. I nodded toward the resealed envelope still sitting on the table between us. You looked at his face, and you sent it back anyway. I don't think you ever really answered that question for yourself. I think you just got very good at not asking it. Her eyes went to the envelope again, and this time she didn't look away from it fast. For a moment I watched a decade catch up with her all at once. Not dramatically, just a small, tired collapse around the eyes. The look of someone doing arithmetic she'd avoided for a very long time, and not liking the total. I don't know how to undo 10 years, Natalie, she said, quieter than anything else she'd said all morning. I'm not asking you to undo it, I said. I'm asking you to stop pretending it didn't happen the way it happened. That's the whole thing you'd have to do. Just that. The garage door rumbled. Owen came in from the driveway, saw my mother, saw the lockbox open on the table, saw me. He didn't say a word. He set his bag down, walked over, put his hand on my shoulder, and sat beside me. That was all. No confrontation, no speech, just a man who showed up. The way he'd shown up every single day for 10 years. Because that was who he was underneath the flannel shirts and the calloused hands my mother had once called not our kind of people. My mother looked at his hand on my shoulder for a long moment, and I think finally she understood. I hadn't been waiting for the Callaways this whole time. I'd already built a family of my own. Mom, I said, I'm not giving you the money. Natalie, not because we can't. Because the second I write that check, you'll tell yourself, and you'll tell Whitney, and everyone at that club, that this was just a rough patch. A misunderstanding that finally got sorted out. It wasn't a rough patch. It was 10 years of choices. Yours? I slid her list back across the table, untouched. If you actually want to know your grandchildren, not as a line item, as people, that starts with an apology. Not to me. To them. And it doesn't start today. It starts whenever you're actually ready to mean it. She didn't take the list. She stood, picked up her folio, walked to the door, stopped, turned halfway back like she might say something, and then didn't. The door clicked shut behind her, not a slam. Just a quiet, final sound. The sound of someone leaving who understood. Somewhere underneath all that pride, exactly what she'd lost and couldn't buy back. If someone in your life only came looking once, your circumstances changed. I need you to tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And I think there are more of us carrying this than anyone admits out loud. And if this story is the reason you're still watching, this is exactly what her side of the story is for every woman who held it together alone. So if you haven't yet, hit subscribe, because there's more where this came from. My father called 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, not a special occasion, just an ordinary day. Your mother told me what happened, he said. I should have opened that door for you years ago. I should have called after the wedding. After Caleb. After every single card that came back. I have no excuse, and I'm not going to give you one. I'm sorry. I was quiet for a long moment. I believe you, Dad, I finally said. But believing you and trusting you again are two different things. We can start slow. Calls, every couple of weeks. No visits yet, no money. Just talking. That's more than I deserve, he said. It's exactly what you deserve, I told him. Not more, not less. Whitney texted once after that. You could have just helped us. I didn't answer. Some messages answer themselves. My mother hasn't called. Hasn't written. The silence is hers now, and for the first time in 10 years. That feels like something I chose, not something that was done to me. The lockbox is back on its shelf. I haven't had to add anything new to it. I hope I never do again. Here's what 10 years of silence taught me. Family isn't the people who share your last name. And it isn't the people who show up the moment your bank account changes. Family is the people who show up when your barn is cold and your prototype keeps jamming and your babies need somebody to rock them at 3 in the morning. Family drives 4 hours each way and never once misses a birthday. It was never about the money. It was always, only, about who actually showed up. That's my story. 10 years, 1 lockbox, and a family I built with my own 2 hands when the one I was born into decided I wasn't worth keeping. If it reminded you that your worth was never a number on somebody else's list, share it with a woman who needs to hear that today. Leave a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.